Good morning, all. Welcome to the Carsey Policy Hour, our monthly discussion series for people passionate about the issues and policies that are shaping New Hampshire communities. The topic this month is Community Empower, Electricity by the People, for the People. My name is UC Terrell. As folks are entering, please type your name and organization in the chat so we know who's here today. As always, your questions and comments are welcome also in the chat. I'll include as many as I can in the discussion, and we'll also follow up with the recording, slides, and a resource sheet. Thanks as always to our partners at the state's Bureau of Education and Training. The BET's Certified Public Manager Program feeds into the Carsey School's master's programs in public administration, public policy, community development, and global affairs. This month's topic is a live wire, pun intended. This month, customers in 12 New Hampshire municipalities are in the process of being automatically enrolled in the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, expanding service to a total of 28 cities and towns statewide. Yesterday, as many as a dozen other towns approved town meeting warrant articles for Community Power. And on Monday night, the Concord City Council voted unanimously to join Community Power Coalition. How did we get to this point? More broadly, how do we as a state reach the triplet goals of sustainability, resilience, and affordability with our power, especially for vulnerable groups? You all know me from the Carsey Policy Hour series, but my other hat at Carsey is as training director for our Center for Impact Finance. Our mission is to help increase access to responsible capital for low-income and historically disadvantaged communities. The field of community development finance formed as a response to redlining in the 60s and 70s. With the current influx of clean energy capital, our fear is that similar systemic inequalities could be perpetuated, this time in climate finance, that the communities already feeling the brunt of pollution and disinvestment will bear a disproportionate share of transition costs and be left behind as outside investors seek fast, safe returns. Carsey Center for Impact Finance is working closely with community and mainstream investors, green banks, and many others to develop the ecosystem for equitable and sustainable climate finance. Our website has a ton of resources, including educational webinars, policy briefs, trainings for lenders and developers, and our new Practitioner's Guide to Community Lending for a Just and Equitable Energy Transition. Check it out. Let me know if you'd like to connect. Our speakers today have been at the forefront of energy innovation in New Hampshire. Kicking us off is Jeannie Oliver, Senior Director of ROC-NH at the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. Most recently, Jeannie was a professor of law and staff attorney at the Vermont Law and Graduate School's Energy Clinic. There, a consulting project led her to New Hampshire and the work she'll describe today. As Jeannie speaks, folks, please drop your questions and comments in the chat.
So thank you, UC. As you said, I'm Jeannie Oliver. I'm the Senior Director of ROC New Hampshire, and ROC New Hampshire is a program of the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, which is a community development financial institution. And our mission is to help those typically underserved members of the New Hampshire economy to participate more fully in the economy through access to capital and opportunities. I have been working in the community solar space for about 10 years now, previously with the Vermont Law and Graduate School, but also in the solar siting space at the Vermont Department of Public Service. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about community solar, sort of setting the scene for what Henry will talk to you about with community power. So community solar is the community opportunity for renewables that predates what the exciting political landscape that we've found ourselves in now in New Hampshire. So what is community solar? Probably most people on this webinar know what community solar is or have heard a little bit about what community solar is, but at its very basic level, it's simply a solar array that is shared by multiple electric customers. So the photo here is actually a community solar array located at the Mascoma Meadows resident-owned community in Lebanon, New Hampshire. And so it's located on land owned by Mascoma Meadows. It's a manufactured housing park, a cooperative manufactured housing park, and each of the households in this park are sharing the solar electricity from this one solar array. But as the saying goes, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Community solar, you might sometimes hear it referred to as shared solar at its most descriptive, a solar farm, solar garden, or some combination of those phrases. But essentially, it's a single solar array shared by multiple customers. Why do we have community solar? For the same reasons why people might want to do individual rooftop solar or solar located on their own property. Some customers are motivated by the carbon reduction and environmental benefits of going solar. Some are motivated by the financial benefits of going solar. Some people are motivated by both of those things. Community solar provides those same benefits as rooftop solar. However, not everyone has the ability to do rooftop solar for a number of reasons. For example, renters who don't own their own property, unlikely to be putting rooftop solar or siting solar on their rented property. There may be siting constraints, such as not having a south or southwest facing roof, not having sufficient land, having some kind of natural resource constraints on your land that prevents you from installing solar on your own property. And there's financial considerations that may make rooftop solar not viable. There's some, I'll speak to the models of community solar in a minute, but community solar offers a way to have no upfront costs, depending on the model that's used. It also enables economies of scale. So per watt, it's more affordable. And sometimes there are land use benefits associated with community solar. It can also go the other way. It just depends on the site that's chosen for your community solar project. Community solar in New Hampshire and in most states is enabled through some form of group, or you might hear it called virtual net metering programs. So in New Hampshire, we have a statute that permits net metered renewable energy facilities to share the proceeds, so the benefits from a single renewable energy generation facility with multiple customers, and that's called group net metering here in New Hampshire. And then there are administrative rules that flesh out that statutory authority to do group net metering. The net metering tariff, so how much you receive for the electricity you generate, is set in statute and then again in those administrative rules. And there's two categories here in New Hampshire. So we have a rate that applies for small customer generators. So that's solar facilities up to, well, renewable energy facilities, I should say, up to 100 kilowatts AC. And when I say 100 kilowatts AC, we're talking about roughly half an acre of land there. And that net metering rate is calculated at 100% of the default service rate, so your energy charge, 100% of the transmission charge, and 25% of the distribution charge. And that was set by the new net metering rule in 2017. Large customer generators, so that's above 100 kilowatts and up to 1 megawatt, 5 megawatts if you're a municipal customer. You get 100% of the default service rate, but you don't get the distribution charge or the transmission charge. So here in New Hampshire, the net metering rate is very much tied to our electric rates. And that has a couple of implications. It means when electric rates are high, your net metering rate is also going to be high. When electric rates go down, your net metering rate is also going to go down. And just thinking back over the last 5 years where I've been working on some community solar projects in New Hampshire, we've seen the net metering rate really vary from around 8-9 cents a kilowatt hour to in the 20-cent range last year as electric prices went up, and it's starting to come back down again now, so a little bit variable. And then just to sort of explain how group net metering works in a really simplified way, your solar array, so that shared solar array generates electricity. This is working within the existing utility paradigm, so that electricity is fed back into the distribution electric grid. and then the utility is crediting the participants. So each of the people that have opted into a community solar project, it will credit them at the net metering rate for the percentage that they're entitled to of that solar production. Now, there are two key models for community solar. So not all community solar is the same. The primary model that I've worked with is community-owned community solar projects, and this has been the case both with the Vermont projects I've worked on and the New Hampshire projects I've worked on. Essentially, this is a turnkey model of community solar, for those of you who've heard that phrase, where the solar array gets installed and handed over to the customers once it's ready to be turned on. So a community-owned community solar project is exactly what it sounds like. The participants purchase a percentage share of that solar project up front. What this means is that they are entitled to the investment tax credits if they're eligible for them. And the participants receive all of the benefits from that solar array over the life of the project. So from day one, they will be getting all of the financial benefits. And if they are motivated by environmental and sustainability goals, they will be keeping the RECs, renewable energy certificates, from that project. With a community-owned community solar array, participants, of course, because they own it, are responsible for the cost of operations and maintenance over the life of the project. But you'll see different models here where some community-owned community solar projects choose to do the operations and maintenance themselves, sort of working in a cooperative model of ownership, very hands-on, self-managed, whereas other community-owned projects may engage a operations and maintenance service provider to take care of that for them at a small fee. The other model of community solar projects is sort of a third-party owned community solar project. And sometimes you'll hear this described as a subscription model, or sometimes you'll hear it described as a power purchase agreement model. Essentially, what this is a solar developer or investor owns the solar project. Participants make periodic payments to the project owner. So usually we might call that a power purchase agreement payment or a subscription fee. It's typically monthly and it's at a pre-negotiated rate. The participants receive less of the financial benefits under this model than they would under a community-owned model. That's because the third-party owner is, taking a return on their investment in this model. Typically, under a power purchase agreement model, there will be an opportunity for the participants to purchase the solar array at a future date, usually when the investment tax credit has been realized. So community solar in the US, I just pulled this chart from the Solar Energy Industries Association website. You'll see the green slice there is community solar. So it is growing. It's a small piece of the puzzle, but it is a growing piece of the puzzle. And then in New Hampshire, you'll see in 2018, there's like enough community solar installations that it actually shows up, but it hasn't been particularly a strong model in New Hampshire to date. You see, we have significant increase in solar installations here in New Hampshire over the last 2 years. And I attribute that, to a couple of things. One is the net metering rate went up significantly in 2022 and 2023 as electric prices went up. The cost of solar installations is coming down, and people are really working hard in this state to try and accelerate the adoption of renewable energy. I think currently there's approximately 263 megawatts of installed solar in New Hampshire, but this is pretty low compared to our neighboring states. In Vermont, for example, it's over 400 megawatts of installed solar. And part of that, I think, is in New Hampshire, we have this variable net metering rate, which makes it a little challenging for investors. It's less predictable what your return on your investment will be when that net metering rate is going up and down and fluctuating. Part of it is attributable to the renewable portfolio standard and New Hampshire's goals for renewables. They're not super ambitious here. I think it's like less than 1% for new solar installations. So ROC Community Solar, this is where I've spent really the main part of the last several years in community solar, especially now that I'm working at ROC New Hampshire, but even when I was working at the Vermont Law and Graduate School Energy Clinic, we were very much focused on climate equity and bringing the benefits of renewable energy to communities that are more low to moderate income. And so for those of you who maybe have not encountered resident-owned communities before, resident-owned communities are manufactured housing parks where the residents have come together to purchase the underlying land. And this is very different to sort of your traditional model of mobile home parks where either an investor or just a third party owns the land and the residents own their individual homes, but they don't have that security of land ownership. Resident-owned communities typically made up of low to moderate income residents, households. And so in New Hampshire, there's 149 resident-owned communities, and it really provides a great opportunity to do community solar because they resident-owned communities have a cooperative structure. There's a board of directors, sort of a centralized decision-making body. The membership is very involved in running the community. It operates like a small democracy. So we like to say that community solar is where affordable housing and climate equity meet, especially in this ROC context. We have 4 community solar projects in ROCs in New Hampshire so far, and that probably doesn't sound like a lot, but it's really helped to develop a model to scale this up. And as people know, there's significant amounts of federal funding being allocated towards low moderate income community solar projects, and we've been able to work with the Vermont Law and Graduate School and with these 4 ROCs to develop a model that's very replicable. Currently, those projects are serving just over 100 low moderate income households. It helps to stabilize the energy costs in these communities and improve their quality of life. So, and I'll go through each of our projects very quickly in a minute to show you what that financial return looks like. Let's see. In New Hampshire, we've been very fortunate working with the New Hampshire Department of Energy and previously the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission to have several incentives for low moderate income community solar projects. And that's what's really enabled these ROC community solar projects. You know, the upfront cost of a community solar project is often unattainable for low income communities. And the New Hampshire Department of Energy has provided financial incentives that really help us to overcome that financial barrier. So early on in 2017, the Renewable Energy Fund established a low moderate income community solar grant. And that's been really key. Each of these 4 projects that we have in resident-owned communities so far has been enabled through those Renewable Energy Fund community solar grants. And that's a competitive grant process. It's funded by the compliance payments from utilities. So it's sort of very closely tied to the renewable portfolio standard in that way. And by statute, 15% of the renewable energy funds, the funds coming out of those compliance payments, has been set aside for low moderate income community solar projects, which is awesome. And then in addition to that, in 2019, the legislature created the low moderate income adder. So this provides a 2.5 cent adder to the net metering rate for projects that qualify as low moderate income projects. And all of our ROC projects have qualified for that. In addition, this is a project that a program that I'm less familiar with because it doesn't work as well for ROC communities, but it does work for low-income residences, so households. SB 270 in 2022 developed the Energy Assistance Program Low Moderate Income. adder. And so there's up to 6 megawatts of capacity each year that will be put out for a competitive application process where the utility identifies EAP customers, so Energy Assistance Program eligible customers, and that sort of helps manage the administration of these projects and finding the off-takers for these projects. And it takes that sort of administrative cost out of low moderate income solar projects. So I'll run really quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time for this, but I'll run really quickly through the 4 projects that we do have in ROCs. So Mascoma Meadows was our very first resident-owned community solar project. It's 100 kilowatts. It's owned by a developer, so we worked with Revision on this project. This was the very first one, so very experimental. We had partial grant funding from what was then the Public Utilities Commission, but under the Renewable Energy Fund, community solar grants. The land actually was donated by the church next door, so this is very much a project of neighbors helping neighbors and very community and civic-minded project. There are 45 households participating, and we structured this one so that each of those households, instead of receiving a check, so income, receives a $20 lot rent reduction, and that helps us to overcome some of the concerns that we had about the benefits cliff. This is under net metering 1.0, so under this structure, the utility pays one check to the host, in this case, the cooperative, the ROC, each month, and it's up to that host to allocate the benefits to the participants. The amount of the lot rent is reviewed annually by the board, and as electric rates went up, they got the bonus lot rent reduction, and as they go down, we may need to reconsider what that monthly lot rent reduction is. Our second project was at the White Rock Cooperative in Tilton, New Hampshire. That's a smaller array, 66 kilowatts, but it's owned by the ROC, so it's owned by the resident-owned community and located on their land. This one was 90% grant funded by the Renewable Energy Fund. There are 23 participating households, and one of the quirks of the low moderate income adder is that you have to do on-bill crediting to be eligible to receive that low moderate income adder. When we initially applied for the grant, though, we had modeled this off the Mascoma Meadows project with a lot rent reduction, and so that's why you see this strange split between lot rent reduction and on-bill crediting. It really is just a matter of timing of when that LMI adder came into effect. Our next project, which this one is not built yet because there are some siting issues that are being litigated by a neighbor, but we received full grant funding for a 62 kilowatt excuse me, project in Stratham, New Hampshire. Again, this would be owned by the resident-owned community and serving 23 low moderate income households. At least 75% of the credits have to go to households that are identified specifically as low moderate income households. So fingers crossed that we are able to get this one built in the next year. And then finally, our most recent project, which I believe just got completed, is at the Pine Hill Cooperative in Conway, New Hampshire. And this is a 50 kilowatt AC project owned by the resident-owned community. It's 100% grant funded, serving 25 low moderate income households. And in this case, it's like our most simple model. This is the one that we will replicate. It's all on-bill crediting so that they can opt in to the LMI adder. And so looking forward, we've applied for grant funding for another resident-owned community to do a 100 kilowatt solar project in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Those funds have not been awarded yet, so we're keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that we'll be able to do our 5th project in this coming construction season. And then on the horizon, of course, is the Solar for All. So the big federal money coming down for community solar projects in underserved communities. And if we're successful in receiving the Solar for All grant funding in collaboration with the New Hampshire Department of Energy. We anticipate doing another 10 to 20 resident-owned community solar projects over the next 10 years. So I'll stop there, and after Henry has spoken, I'll take questions, I think, right, Yusi?
Yes.
Great.
So much, Jeannie. That was great. And I hadn't heard the tagline where affordable housing and climate equity meet. The resident-owned communities are such an elegant way to overcome some of the customer acquisition barriers, especially making sure that we're supporting low and moderate income households. And to hear how the New Hampshire legislature has supported that over the years is great. We hope that that trend continues.
Yeah, it's been a really great partnership and collaborative environment here in New Hampshire. It hasn't been seamless. There's been, speed bumps along the way, but we've really found that people across the board have been committed to supporting low moderate income community solar projects.
So next we'll hear from Henry Herndon, Director of Member Services at the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. Henry will introduce himself, but I'll just say, Henry, I knew you back when, and your success doesn't surprise me.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really great to be here, and thank you, Jeannie. That was a really great overview of community solar, and I think part of my talk will get into some of the questions of how can community power relate to community solar, and I think we'll be successful in the community power market to the extent that we're able to scale up the work that clean energy innovators and clean energy developers like Jeannie and many others are doing across the state. 10x, 100x, if we can sort of expand those programs and help them scale, then we know that community power will have been successful. I do know UC, I'm a proud alum of the University of New Hampshire. I have a bachelor's in political science and a master's of science in natural resources and the environment. I worked in the environmental policy and planning lab, and I worked with some folks like Michael Swack and Clay Mitchell and others in the Carsey world, and I worked under Kat Ashcraft at UNH. So glad to be back. Pleased to be joining you all here today. And let's see, I'm going to talk about a few things here. I'm going to give a little bit of context in terms of electric utility restructuring of wholesale and retail electricity markets and sort of where we were, where we are today, and where we might be going. I'm also going to explain what is community power and how community power through a reforming of governance in the power sector can really help to realize these more competitive electricity markets and give local control and really democratize decision-making to cities and towns and the grassroots at the local level. And then I may close in some way by sharing a little more about what I think the future is going to look like in terms of what are the additional policy reforms that I feel or I believe are required to scale up the work Jeannie's doing, scale up a competitive retail marketplace for electricity and clean energy sort of from the bottom up. So with that, I'll start by just recapping what is electric utility restructuring. So New Hampshire is either famous or not famous for being the first state in the nation to pass an electric utility restructuring act or legislation. And this was in 1996. And what this did was it required our vertically integrated utility companies that in much of the country still own all of the distribution, the transmission, and the generation components of the electricity system. This has typically been, or before 1996, it was a vertically integrated monopoly where one vertically integrated company owned the power plants, owned the transmission lines, owned the distribution, owned everything front to back. And New Hampshire, looking at ways to reduce electricity costs and increase competition, decided to break that monopoly and require that our utility companies divest of their generation fleets, sell their power plants into a competitive marketplace, and introduce competition and price signals into this wholesale power market. And some of us may be familiar with the ISO New England, the Independent System Operator of New England, which is the nonprofit that operates a 6-state regional electricity market where different firms and different generators and different suppliers all compete to provide electricity at lowest cost based on real-time price signals for supply and demand. And this is really grounded in New Hampshire's commitment to free and fair competition in the trades and industries, is an inherent and essential right of the people and should be protected against all monopolies and conspiracies which tend to hinder or destroy it. So live free or die state, very market focused. And we were successful over the decades to come after this law was passed in 1996 in breaking the generation monopoly, creating a wholesale competitive marketplace on the bulk side. So wholesale markets are large scale power plants selling into high voltage transmission lines. And then we get into the retail side when we get into the state regulated lower voltage distribution system, which is regulated by the Public Utility Commission. And then retail markets are sort of this missing key that I'm going to try to unpack a little bit. And when we talk about what the works Jeannie's doing, where she's creating distributed solar on a local level that is feeding the community directly or feeding back into the grid, that's an example of a retail electricity market. Anywhere where the customer is purchasing power, or at a customer or community scale, we could have generation, energy efficiency, local resources, batteries, electric vehicles, anything that could provide value or services to the grid. An important point I'm going to sit on a little bit is this, our restructuring statute called for competitive markets in wholesale and retail, and we have been successful on the wholesale side. We have a competitive real-time pricing marketplace where there's open access and different entities can compete to provide service in the wholesale market. We have yet to realize a competitive retail market, and that's sort of the open question of how can we build the clean energy transition and how can community power support that. So that's a little bit of what I talked about here, but successful on the wholesale side, while retail power markets remain largely monopolized, and they do not have the same type of price signals that will tell a solar plant or solar plus storage or an electric vehicle or any customer device really when it is valuable for them to provide power or to curtail load. So again, retail markets being customer consumption, production, rooftop solar, electric vehicles, any of the aforementioned technologies. And I'm going to get into the community power law, but an important aspect of that legislation is that it grants municipal and county community power agencies broad authority to provide both wholesale power supply services and retail services. So this is a key consideration in the legislation, where in addition to being a supplier of power and accessing the wholesale power market, these local communities, I'm going to talk more about what community power is, but they do have authorities to conduct demand-side management, energy conservation, meter reading, and really broadly any other services related to the retail market and the retail side of the bill. I'm going to maybe circle back to this quote for now, but so before diving into that, I wanted to sort of reflect and try to paint this picture, like what is this vision of, 5-10 years from now when we actually have a competitive retail electricity market. And I figured I'd throw up this picture from my thesis when I was at UNH, because I think it helps to sort of paint this picture. But I opened that thesis by sort of inviting my readers to imagine a New Hampshire city or town where maybe 5 or 10 years in the future, and this community is producing 50% or 100% of its electricity needs from local or sustainable resources. And we can imagine this sort of symphony of resources, everything from building weatherization, energy efficiency upgrades, fleets of community solar or rooftop solar or ground-mounted solar installations, perhaps many of them equipped with batteries to make them dispatchable. And if you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of these in the aggregate, you can add them up to be virtual power plants that are responsive in providing the power needs of the community. We can imagine buildings electrified with air source heat pumps, electric hot water heaters, and other devices that are equipped with automation capabilities so they can respond to price signals in real time. They can shift load away from high cost or high polluting times into times of high solar production, for example. You can imagine electric vehicles that serve as grid resources, dumping power into the grid and really becoming a revenue generating asset for their owner, and providing grid services during peak load times. So actually being a moneymaker for the people who own them and in a coordinated fashion where they're interacting with the grid intelligently. So all of this technology absolutely exists 100% right now. Like, we have the technical capability to do this. And what is missing is a competitive retail marketplace that will provide market actors access to data, access to information, access to real-time price signals or time-based price signals that will allow the customers to become prosumers, allow them to have their devices become assets, and really participate in a competitive local retail marketplace. So that is the vision that we're working towards. We have the technical capability, and the challenge at present, I think, is sort of seeing through the promise of community power to really realize that and scale up the kind of work that Jeannie is doing and allow it to innovate further. So with that context, I'll talk about what is community power, and what is our current status for the state. So right now, community power exists in over a dozen states in various forms, some better than others. It is not a silver bullet. It is not universally a success story. There are degrees of success of community power, and we hope to achieve sort of the gold standard in New Hampshire with our new market. At its best, community power is a form of public power that democratizes energy decision-making to the municipal or the regional level, and it allows cities and towns to either individually or by acting jointly assume the role of the default electricity supplier. So this has typically been a role served by utility companies, but currently now authorized for cities and towns to become the electricity supplier. So what that means is a city or town or multiple acting jointly can band together to pool their purchasing power for electricity for all customers within the city. They achieve economy of scale. They can access the power market. They can have more choice and drive down cost. Importantly, the utility company is always going to own the grid. And if we remember that natural monopoly, the transmission and distribution will always remain with the utility company. And then on the customer side, there are lower rates, there are added product options, and there's the potential for innovation. And really, I think I maybe want to almost modify this slide to have an arrow going back from this green right-hand side back this way to illustrate that retail marketplace where this is no longer a one-way flow of power from the wholesale top down to the bottom. It is an upflow, grassroots, bottom up from services from within the community. So the statute's RSA 53E, and just some key points about the policies are voluntary. Any customer can opt in or opt out whenever they choose. But when a town or city chooses to do this, customers will be notified and then automatically enrolled. So the vast majority of customers within a community are automatically enrolled and then can choose to depart the program. So Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, this is a community-governed nonprofit power supplier that was founded in 2021 and has since launched the market in New Hampshire. So currently there are over 50 city and town members and 2 county members that represent more than 30% of the state's population. The communities shown in green launched their programs in spring and fall of 2023. So they've been operating for coming up on a year now. And as UC mentioned, an additional 12 communities in the dark blue are in this March in process of enrolling their customers. So customers, as we speak, day by day, are being switched over to the community power program with lower rates and sort of this menu of clean energy options, which I will talk about. So currently, there are 120,000 customers in the state that are supplied by community power programs. Those customers have benefited from over $9 million in bill savings in the first year. And the scale of the coalition is actually larger than 2 of the, or I guess 3 of the 4 utilities in the state, larger than Unitil, Liberty, or New Hampshire Electric Co-op, and second only to Eversource. This is spreading very quickly. Yesterday was town meeting day. Many cities and towns, or many towns in the state brought forward warrant articles to approve community power, and we can imagine several dozen more bringing programs online this year and in the years to come. So importantly, this is a nonprofit organization that was created by New Hampshire cities, towns, and counties to serve them. So I mentioned sort of a reform of governance. Typically, or until this point, power sector has been governed by, in many ways, the investor-owned utilities, the state regulators, and the for-profit supply companies that are the experts in the wholesale power markets. And what we achieve with community power is really a transference of knowledge and expertise and governance authority to the local level. So the board of directors is representatives from those many cities and towns you saw on the previous slide, folks from city councils, select boards, local energy committees, many of whom have had long, illustrious careers in the power sector and bring a real breadth and depth of expertise. But really instilling in the nonprofit transparency, accountability, local control. All of the meetings are open to the public, a number of board and committee meetings that are subject to the right to know law. So we have this community governance on the one side, and then on the other side, we have the expertise. So professional staff, professional CEO, staff such as myself, and a number of professional service providers who really bring the technical expertise to operate in the wholesale power markets, provide customer service, legal, accounting, banking, et cetera, et cetera. This combination of community governance and expert operations, I think, is a key aspect to the success of the organization. Let's see. So in terms of a customer perspective, customers all now have the opportunity to choose from a menu of clean energy options. So shown on the right here, there's currently 4 options, and customers can choose the basic renewable energy minimum required by the state. And I'm sorry, this is a dated slide. The rates have since changed, but the illustration remains the same. And then any customer could choose 10% more power, Granite Plus, Clean 50, Clean 100, up to 100% clean energy, and many of them do. Some communities also, on a broad-based default basis, can choose higher levels of renewable power. So Hanover, Peterborough, and Plainfield are all enrolling majority of customers into a higher renewable energy product because that is a local policy goal of those communities, endorsed by the communities. Any customer can choose whichever option they like, and there are a number of options that result in savings relative to the utility supply option. This slide is also just sort of illustrating the rates over time relative to the utility companies. So in blue, you have Unitil, Liberty, Eversource, the 3 investor-owned utilities, compared to the community power rates shown in red, consistently outperforming the utilities over time, which is, I think, a key aspect of the success. One of the themes I want to touch on is, expanding the menu of options, expanding clean energy choices is a really key success of community power. And these are allowing customers essentially to purchase renewable energy certificates to vote with their dollars and choose to buy clean power. This is one aspect of expanding clean energy, but perhaps really more impactful would be along the lines of developing that retail market that I talked about earlier, actually developing steel in the ground, solar generation within a community, solar plus storage, and all the other resources I mentioned. Empowering that will be a greater degree of success rather than allowing customers to shop for renewable energy certificates. One of the things I want to sort of close with is talk a little bit about the policy process that allowed us to arrive at this market, and then some of the policy challenges moving forward to get to that retail marketplace. So there was a very strong, broad-based grassroots effort in 2021 to address legislation to make this market possible. And what we saw was legislation in the 2021 legislative session be introduced at the request of Eversource that essentially would have stripped away all of the authorities under the community power law right at the beginning of the market's development. And the response was many dozens of municipal cities and towns, municipal leaders across the state coming together to participate in a months-long grassroots campaign statewide, really pulling on the levers of media, of engaging with their local elected officials, with their state officials. We had communities, over 700 citizens and local officials signing on to petitions to weigh in on this critical legislation. Letters from the 10 mayors of New Hampshire cities, Municipal Association, Association of Counties, just heavy media coverage across the state, and from the bottom up and from the top down, really to result in positive policymaking and really a collaborative work sessions with utilities, municipalities, industry stakeholders, and some of the key legislators to take a really bad bill and rewrite it by amendment to make it a positive bill to enable this marketplace to succeed to the extent that it has. And I talk about this because I think community power is really it's a transference of economic and political capital to local communities, local elected officials and decision makers. It sort of illustrates the potential for these communities to take charge of being real participants in energy policymaking. And that has been successful to date. And I think there is potential and perhaps a need for additional policymaking to see through the creation of a real clean energy retail marketplace. And I'll close by just sort of talking about some of the ongoing challenges. So while we have a number of these retail authorities in legislation, there continue to be a number of ways in which community power is not yet able to realize that vision of a local clean energy marketplace. So monopoly utilities, investor-owned utilities still control metering of customer electricity usage and all of the data associated with a customer's electricity consumption or patterns. Monopoly utilities continue to control customer billing and communication functions largely. So how do we educate the customers? How do we communicate with them? How do we bill them for our services? That's under monopoly utility control. And this concept of load settlement, which I probably won't get into, but it's just sort of the technical process of matching up how much power comes out of the wholesale market and then how much actually shows up on the customer's electricity meter. How do we match those things together to make the marketplace efficient? And again, it's important for load settlement to recognize Jeannie's local solar projects in the right way and value them appropriately as load reduction as an offset to what we otherwise would have to buy in the bulk power market. This is a system that continues to be under monopoly control, and as a result is not really realizing the potential benefits and values of local solar or batteries or other resources. So because of these current and ongoing challenges, and my colleague Dina Dennis, who's our Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs, is in perhaps a dozen different dockets at the Public Utility Commission working on resolving some of these challenges. But at present, community power cannot yet source power from local generators through net metering. So Jeannie's projects, as an example, cannot participate in community power because of obstructions from utility companies. We cannot offer time-based rates, which are essential to realizing the retail marketplace. And really the value of load management and other distributed energy resources is not able to be fully realized. So there are ongoing challenges. There are additional regulatory and perhaps other policy arenas to be addressed. And I think the key to the success of community power will be if we can go beyond lowering folks' electric rates, giving some of the local control, and really leveraging these communities' newfound knowledge and ownership over the revenue stream of the sale of electricity within their communities to really implement local projects and programs, either under current policy conditions or by continuing to use their collective power to implement new policy solutions moving forward. So with that, I'll pause. I probably talked too long and looking forward to the Q&A and discussion.
Thank you, Henry. That was really fantastic. And we have about 10 minutes left, which is less than we often have, but I think really appropriate given the wealth of information that both you and Jeannie shared with us. Henry, there is a question in the chat, which I hope you could answer in the chat. What does the electric choices chart look like for the New Hampshire Electric Co-op? Another cooperative model. Would you mind answering in the chat? And in the meantime, for this webinar, I got a statement from Eversource's Director of Government Affairs. The full statement will be posted on our Carsey Policy Hour website, but I wanted to read an excerpt as Henry talked about a vision for the future that includes some significant changes to how the regulated utilities operate as well. Eversource wrote, "We are supportive of municipal aggregation and would like to see them achieve their desired objectives. However, there are substantial modifications to enterprise-wide systems required in some of the proposals that have significant costs. And to the extent that all utility customers would be paying for these modifications, we remain mindful that any such changes moving forward should be in the public interest. And those are just excerpts. In a complaint against Eversource, I'll put the docket in the chat, that I recall estimates at around $4 million in infrastructure improvement costs for Eversource, $4 million for Liberty, $1 million for Unitil. And so, a question is, how do we make these infrastructure investments without further burdening the low-income households who have already seen such increases in rates?
Sure, I'll comment on that. So, we have clear state law policy direction to implement competitive retail and wholesale electricity markets, and either the sort of monopoly owners of the technological systems that can enable that will implement those, will make certain investments to meet the stated policy objectives of the state, or we'll have to find another way to implement those, perhaps relieve them of that responsibility. And I think, there's sort of a common, anyone who's worked in the clean energy business has always heard sort of the line of, oh, we can't do that, our billing system can't handle it, from utility companies. And I think it's sort of it's unfortunate that we're sort of stuck working with technologies that are many decades outdated, that are preventing some of the existing innovative technologies from participating in the system. There absolutely is, these investments can be made readily, costs can be recovered. They won't, the sort of fear-mongering that they will cause everybody's electric rates to go through the roof, I think is largely unfounded.
Thank you. And we could debate the pros and cons of energy sector deregulation, its various forms. I'm sure we will in the coming months. Shout out to Stephen Bird, Professor of Political Science at Clarkson University, hence the Clarkson students in the chat, who I hope will enter some pithy and controversial questions. But Stephen Bird is Carsey's newly hired director, who will be joining us in June. And we're looking forward to going even deeper into these issues and opportunities in the months ahead. Jeannie, I wanted to toss to you, how successful have New Hampshire's low and moderate income solar initiatives been? What can we do to accelerate their development? And if you would touch on this idea of community benefits, so like workforce development, ensuring that projects that are sited in communities actually benefit those communities.
Yeah, so the New Hampshire low moderate income community solar initiatives have been, as I presented, very successful for resident owned communities, but there have been some stumbling blocks for other low moderate income housing developments. The way the legislation was originally drafted made it difficult for multifamily low moderate income housing to take advantage of the Renewable Energy Fund grant opportunities, because it required individual residential metering. That's now being corrected, so we'll see what that looks like going forward in terms of multifamily housing participation in those opportunities. Another barrier, I think, to implementation of the low moderate income community solar projects is just that customer acquisition process, and also the ongoing administration for these projects. And Henry sort of touched on some of the outdated software that utilities are using. It's not easy to do all of the reporting because of that. So getting the customer electric use data and reporting back to the Department of Energy and the utilities for the group net metering reporting obligations. The resident-owned communities, of course, offer a way to overcome those barriers. And so with multifamily housing as well, where you have the centralized administration of your customers who are participating in a community solar project. So I think it's been successful. It's really seeded low moderate income community solar projects. It can be more successful as we learn lessons and we start to fix some of those bugs in the system. And then in terms of community benefits, so as we start to receive federal funding and take advantage of federal grant opportunities, part of the mission of that grant funding is to accelerate the local economy and the local renewable energy economy with workforce development, and also to ensure that the communities where the projects are sited are the communities that are benefiting from those projects and from the power generation. So we're working very intentionally to try and achieve those goals from the federal funding. Those goals are important to us too. So making sure that we have members within our resident-owned communities who are really stepping up and taking the lead in information sharing, again, the seeding idea. And then one of the projects that we have applied for federal funding for up in the North Country, part of that project will be working with the CAF agency, and it will include a workforce development component to that as well, with apprenticeship and training. So yeah.
Fantastic. And there are a slew of great questions in the chat. Stephen asks us about leveraging IRA funds. I'm going to read them all out. We won't get to all of them, but feel free to address these very quickly in your final closing comments in a minute. Anthony has asked a question to me. Will there be future sessions that address more environmental issues to solar sites and solar site longevity and decommissioning? Likely not immediately through the Carsey Policy Hour, which touches on a range of issues affecting the state, but perhaps through the Center for Impact Finance or in other Carsey forums. Laurel has dropped in the chat some of our trainings. One of them, the Community Power Accelerator Learning Lab, is for would-be developers at all stages. And so the questions, for example, how close does community solar have to be to the community it is serving? And even the role of opposition and lawsuits are addressed in that course, as well as in an accompanying workbook. We'll be turning on that into a self-paced course in the coming months as well. Jeannie, you see there's a question about a ROC member moving and any significance in the differences in the complexity of rural compared to urban, for sure. Given our time, or at the top of the hour, a final question. I work at a university. Clarkson is another university. There are a lot of young idealists who want to change the system. You're older idealists. The debate between working from within a system versus challenging or breaking or replacing a system. Both are needed, of course, but these dual approaches can lead to unintentional conflict. Jeannie, you mentioned the community solar movement has essentially worked within the regulated utility paradigm. In contrast, the Community Power Coalition is an innovation that challenges the system in ways that Henry's described. These two approaches are natural allies. You're both mission-driven, you prioritize sustainability, reliability, affordability, but you've bumped up against each other in the current moment. Jeannie's low-income communities will have to choose between the $20 a month household savings from community solar and the discounted rates offered by the Community Power Coalition. Hopefully this incompatibility is temporary, but I wondered if each of you could share reflections on this process of system change for listeners who might also desire that in this or another realm.
Maybe I'll go first. The point of community power is to source power from within the community in a sort of competitive, innovative, efficient way. So right now, the amount that has been achieved by all these, dozens, hundreds of community leaders across the state who have put in the hard work, created programs in their communities, set this up, created the foundation to do community power from, and they've created a menu of options, and they've created savings, and they've gotten control of the revenue stream. So they've achieved an enormous amount. But if we stop here, then it will not have been successful. It will be successful if and when we are able to collaborate and partner with organizations like Jeannie's to actually develop local energy projects in an efficient marketplace.
from my perspective, really finding that common ground. So for us, as I've mentioned before, the partnerships have been key and working across different stakeholder groups. And what we've found is that there often is common ground and aligned mission to help serve low moderate income communities in New Hampshire. And how we do that might change over time, and hopefully it will incorporate community power as one of the solutions. But communicating and finding that common ground has been key for working, I think, both within and sort of expanding what the system is, right? Like reimagining what that system is, so that you're not necessarily working outside the system all the time. The system just becomes more innovative.
I think that's really well said, sort of growing and expanding the system rather than breaking or burning anything down. I don't think either of us are looking to do that. I think we're looking to expand and improve the system.
Towards this vision of a distributed energy network. Absolutely. So Henry, Jeannie, thank you so much for your time today, your leadership in our state's equitable transition to clean energy. Thanks to everyone for attending today. Next month's Carsey Policy Hour welcomes back Mary Stampone, New Hampshire State climatologist and a member of UNH's geology faculty. Mary will talk about the crazy climate year that was 2023 and what communities are doing from the ground up to mitigate and adapt and build human and environmental resilience. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in April.